The Old Fashioned is one of the most iconic cocktails on the planet, adored by bourbon lovers worldwide. 3 simple ingredients, bourbon, sugar, and bitters, and a bit of fruit, have wowed them since the 19th century. A billion variations have popped up, especially in these cocktail-crazed times, but the true recipe is just perfection and hard to top. Today's episode, we see how the Old Fashioned came to be, and that could only begin in one town, Louisville, Kentucky. I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week, we are inspired to live life one cocktail at a time by the best in the industry. Today just happens to be the launch of my Lush Life cocktail collection. Remind everyone how simple it is to make an Old Fashioned by wearing one of my Old Fashioned t-shirts. Head to alushlifemanual.com/merch to check these out. Remember that every penny goes to bring you more lush life. Back to the Old Fashioned and its origins. As David Wondrich, the award-winning cocktail writer, says, anyone who hooks his cart to any cocktail history is going to go off-road. But I truly want to believe that the Old Fashioned was invented at the Pendennis Club. So that's where we're beginning. James Gerhardt, the general manager of one of Louisville's oldest private clubs and where the Old Fashioned is purported to have been invented, is here to tell you his side of the story. Then we pop down to Whiskey Row and Old Forester's new distillery to meet Holly McKnight to see how their bourbon fits into this jigsaw puzzle of Old Fashioned history. After that, we wander down Whiskey Row to let George Harrison explain how we wouldn't even have bourbon if it weren't for Evan Williams. For the pure enjoyment of this episode, I would skip ahead to our cocktail of the week, and while stirring, double back to savor the story ahead.
Well, let's start with cocktails. Cocktails were invented, if you will, to soften bourbon. Back in the earlier days, it was considered scandalous if you would knock your bourbon back, which means, to add distilled water to it to lower the proof. So they actually had to make a softer version of this for women to enjoy, because most of the bourbon that was served in the earlier days was right out of the cask, and it was really hot and really powerful. So that's kind of the thinking behind the cocktail, was to make it a little bit easier as far as an entry, or enjoyable as far as a product for women. So, and it's James Pepper who owned a distillery out of Lexington, who is credited officially with inventing the Old Fashioned. He was a member here. He and owned a distillery in Lexington. He was also a member of a couple of clubs in Lexington. He moved to New York in the late 1800s. And it was in New York where he made this beverage for the bartender at the Waldorf Astoria. Well, this guy was so impressed by it, he asked if he could have the recipe, and also, some of the bourbon used in Kentucky bourbon, to recreate this drink. The drink was a huge, huge hit in New York. And so that's why you kind of get, the Waldorf Astoria saying, well, we invented the Old Fashioned, or you'll have other older hotels or clubs where Pepper was also a member saying that it was invented there. But the original one came from the Pendennis. So, and we're certain of that.
So the bourbon that you used all along to make it, was it always the same kind of bourbon house that was creating it?
Well, in the earlier days, there were so many distilleries, and certainly James Pepper isn't the founder of Old Forester. Old Forester is a Brown-Forman product, and Owsley Brown was the president at the time when this building that the Pendennis is housed in now was built. So there is a loyalty to Old Forester as the original bourbon used for the Old Fashioned. And basically that's because this building was completed in 1929 in September. 1 month before the Great Depression, and Owsley Brown guided us through that Great Depression. So he also had Old Forester designated as a medicinal spirits product. So there was a lot of medicine dispensed here at the Pendennis Club.
Which means he could sell it during Prohibition,
yes,
right?
Yes,
and so he never stopped selling it.
Well, certainly for medicinal purposes, he kept on brewing Old Forester bourbon, and certainly that helped everybody along.
So no wonder the rumor that everyone was sick in Louisville for 10 years, whatever.
A little bit of what else? Yes.
So, but it's labeled Pendennis bourbon.
Yes, and that's because we, over the years, and this has been going on for generations, members will get together and we'll sample several different barrels, okay, and then select the barrel that we like the best, and that becomes our Pendennis bourbon. So, and that's the reason for some of the label changes that you see over the years, because it's a living product, if you will. It's something that once the barrel's finished, and that's several dozen cases. Once that's finished, then we go on to our next barrel selection, and that's one of the more popular committees. There's a line to get in on that one. So
I was going to say, how long do you have to be a member to get on that?
Well,
that committee?
They're only certificate holding members, which means they have voting privileges and a couple other perks.
I want to become an honorary member just to do that.
There you go. That's right.
Is there anything else that you think you want to tell me?
Well, this isn't the only beverage that the Pendennis is famous for. There's also a Pendennis cocktail, and that was invented by members. And I would encourage your listeners to go ahead and Google that or pull up some information on that, because it is a delightful hot weather cocktail. The way that came about was some of the members had residences in Florida. And so they were looking for a drink that they could enjoy over the winter months while they were vacationing in sunny Florida. And then there's also one other one, the Juniper, and there's a Juniper Club here, and that cocktail is enjoyable as well.
Who doesn't want to be part of that committee? Choosing right from the barrel, the dream team. My next stop was the newly opened Old Forester Distillery on Whiskey Row to meet Holly.
Old Forester was founded in 1870 by a man named George Garvin Brown. George Garvin Brown was a 25-year-old pharmaceutical salesman. His clients of the day were prominent physicians in Louisville who complained because the patients that were getting medicinal whiskey prescriptions were getting sick from the whiskey. And that's because at that time it was sold by the barrel to what would essentially be a pharmacy, but in the process of getting to the patient may have been filled with all kinds of other additives to basically make the whiskey stretch further. So his idea was, I will get some great bourbon, I will seal it in a glass bottle, I will sign my name on it as a guarantee of its quality and consistency so that the doctors know that they can prescribe Old Forester with confidence. And what he did really was totally change the game forever. He put whiskey in a glass bottle, and then a lot of, everyone else obviously followed suit.
And so I guess what happened during Prohibition?
So because of this kind of early commitment to quality and this great reputation for consistency, George Garvin Brown was granted one of just 6 licenses to continue selling medicinal whiskey through Prohibition. So Old Forester is the only brand that was sold before, during, and after Prohibition by the same company. It's never changed hands. It's all still been controlled by the Brown family, George Garvin Brown's ancestors.
Now, you told me that he was quite a religious man, and there was this temperance.
He was.
Go ahead.
George Garvin Brown was a very religious man. He was a Christian. He was a Presbyterian, actually. And the Presbyterians were big fans of the temperance movements, but obviously George Garvin Brown was not. So he actually wrote a book called The Holy Bible Repudiates Prohibition, where he went through and pulled various passages to support the responsible consumption of alcohol. He ended up leaving the Presbyterian Church over Prohibition and became an Episcopalian, remained a devout Christian, but just needed to go somewhere that aligned a little more with his ideals.
So Old Forester, why is it called that?
So Old Forester was named initially after one of his clients, Dr. William Forester. He was a friend of his. He was a surgeon in the Union Army. He was a well-regarded physician in Louisville, and so signing his name, putting his name on the bottle was, an endorsement deal of the day. When he retired, there was no longer the need for that endorsement, and so Old Forester, Forrester, became Old Forester with just one R.
I guess because it was already known as Old Forester.
Yeah, and we didn't need that celebrity endorsement, quote unquote, anymore.
And did the bottle stay the same? Do you remember then? Because you guys have some really cool bottles in your collection.
So if you go through, we have archives dating all the way back. I think the first bottle that we actually still have is from the 1890s. But when George Garvin Brown founded Old Forester, he was not a distiller. He was a blender. So he would buy whiskey from 3 different distilleries, blend it into what became Old Forester. It was a 90 proof product at the time, and
that could kill anything.
Yeah. Whatever ailed you.
Exactly.
And he would then bottle it. Later down the road, he did end up buying one of those distilleries and became a distiller, and then Old Forester's.
But you guys were like the first to do a special bottle, right?
Yeah, so it was in the 50s. We were the first to do kind of a holiday decanter. The holiday decanter program went on for a little bit more than a decade. You can still find some out on the bottle swaps and eBay and various things on the internet. You can find some of those bottles. If you're lucky, you'll find one that still has Old Forester in it.
Well, of course, I'm sitting here in this incredibly fabulous new facility that you guys just opened in June. Why did you decide to have this kind of tourist experience now?
So obviously the bourbon is booming. Mm-hmm. It's a growing category, and Old Forester is and has been for forever Louisville's kind of hometown bourbon. It's the bourbon that you go to somebody's house in Louisville and it's going to be sitting on the back bar in every house. Known for great value for the money, really great product, and obviously a lot of local heritage. And as bourbon started to grow, a lot of distilleries began opening up, not just in the Bourbon Trail out in the state, but some down on Whiskey Row. And what Old Forester has that maybe some of these other brands don't have is this true history right here on Whiskey Row in this exact building. So from 1882 to 1919, George Garvin Brown, and then later his son Owsley, ran Old Forester out of the building that we are in today. It did change hands after that for a while, but as bourbon is booming, Brown-Forman starts to think about what can we do, and we have this building is available. We buy it back, kind of saved it really from the wrecking ball, because this whole block was really at its end. And Paul Varga, our CEO, said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. I don't want it to be Disneyland. I want this to be a world-class visitor experience that also distills great whiskey. It has to have both components. It can't be just one or the other. And so that's, where you ended up with what we have here. It was a $45 million, 70,000 square foot distillery, and it is fully functional. You can go from everything to fermentation, followed through distillation. You're going to get to see a cooperage here, which you can't really experience in a lot of places, because Brown-Forman is the only major spirits company in the world that makes all their own barrels. So we have this on-site cooperage where you can watch coopers make and fire barrels, and then we're going to fill those barrels here, and we're going to take them to our aging warehouse on site, and then bottle and of course taste the best part of all.
Of course. Now, do you ever feel Mr. Brown's ghost around here?
I wouldn't say his ghost, but definitely George Garvin Brown's spirit is with us all the time. I do think there are a few ghosts in this building. I've heard some various stories. We don't think it's George's ghost, though.
Well, but let's hope it's George's ghost. No. A walk down Whiskey Row to the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience to meet George and bow down to the man himself, who was alleged to be the first producer of bourbon ever.
Well, Evan Williams came to this part of the world from Wales. He was a Welshman, and he came here to find some fame and fortune in the U.S., like a lot of people did in those days, in the early 1800s.
Great.
Now, one thing that when he came here, he brought along his tradition of distilling from that part of the world. And one thing we generally tell people is you distill what you grow. And when he got here, the major crop that was grown was corn. And so he started distilling corn and making corn whiskey. And he did it really well. People liked his whiskey. And so he, in 1783, applied to be a licensed distiller in the state of Kentucky. And so in 1783, he became the first licensed distiller in the state of Kentucky. And his actual distillery was in a building that used to be across the street from where we are right now. Mm-hmm. There's actually an historical marker over there that talks about that. So he came here from a little town in Wales whose name I can't really pronounce well. It's something like Pwllheli.
I think only the Welsh can pronounce their own names.
I believe that's correct. I believe that's correct. But they, so that was his, that was the town he came from. But he was very, very well known in this area. Interestingly, he passed away in 1810, and his distillery did not survive his passing.
Did he call, when he bottled it, did he call it Evan Williams?
I don't know that there's a record of that.
Uh-huh.
I think it was basically just known as Evan Williams whiskey, that it was his whiskey.
Okay. So then they had to shut when he died. So then how did the name come back again?
So in the mid-50s, the Shapiro family that owns Heaven Hill, and maybe we can step back a little bit from there, Prohibition happened, and it basically wiped out all the distilleries that were down here. There were over 40 distilleries downtown in Louisville at that time. Well, when Prohibition was enacted, it wiped all of that out. When Prohibition was repealed, the 18th Amendment repealed it, then there were some people who wanted to start distilling again, and they approached these 5 brothers. They were the Shapiro brothers, and they said, would you want to be in the distilling business? And they were here in central Kentucky, and they said, yes, we would.
What were they doing before?
They were successful businessmen otherwise. They had stores, like what we would call department stores today. And so they were approached in 1934, and they said, yes, we'll be involved. And the first barrel was produced in, or the first whiskey went into the first barrel in December of 1935. Mm-hmm. It was actually December 13th, which was a Friday. Uh-huh. So they did their first barrel. But after that, because it was such a difficult time, it was still the Depression and things weren't the best. So some of the initial investors went to the brothers and said, we can't afford to do this anymore. If you don't buy us out, we're just going to let everything go. Mm-hmm. And the brothers talked to each other and said, let's stay in the business. And they did. So they basically bought out the other investors, and they remained in the business. And one of the reasons they were able to do that was because of their other businesses, their stores that they had. They were that helped to support the business for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And so they kept it going. And we filled the first barrel in 1935. They filled their 500,000th barrel in 1957. But right around that time, right around the mid-50s, to get back to your original question, right. That's when they took on Evan Williams' name to represent one of their brands.
How did they find out about Evan Williams?
I'm not sure exactly how they found out about it. Partially it might be because where we are right now is directly across the street from where he used to be. And so that might have been part of
The
it.
urban myth, kind of.
Could be. That could be.
So that was when? When did they take the name?
It was in the mid-50s. I don't know the exact date. It was the mid-50s.
Mm-hmm. And so they had been making bourbon all along, and now they've got Evan Williams.
Now they had Evan Williams' name, and it just sort of took off from there.
Okay, great. That's fabulous. All right. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
If James, Holly, and George didn't make you thirsty for an old-fashioned, I'm not sure anything would. A special thanks goes out to Jeff Watt-Roy, who took the time to make me feel at home at the Pendennis Club, and to Jeff Crow at the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience. Also, I couldn't have done this without the support of everyone at Kentucky Tourism. Can you guess what our cocktail of the week is? Who better to explain how to make the Pendennis Old Fashioned but the man himself, Tom Curley, the bartender. So, tell me how it goes.
Okay, like I say, put just a little touch of simple syrup in an old-fashioned glass. A couple wedges of orange. Cherry in each glass. It's very important that there's different type of bitters, but the Angostura bitters is the best. I'm usually a little bit heavy on that. And even more important than that is muddling the fruit, because many times I try to take a shortcut and drinks were sent back because I was just trying to save time. I learned the hard way that muddling these guys is the key. Time for a little ice. And we had some special Pendennis bourbon for this event. Right there.
Oh, really?
And when we're all finished, we do like just a little splash of tap water. And some people, before they drink them, would stir it around a little bit and bring all the mixture at the bottom to the top. I don't know how Jeff Watchroy drinks it, but
Quickly.
and we've done a few of these over the last 100 plus years. In my case, 30. And I hope you all enjoy it.
Thank you, Tom.
Or if you didn't get that, here it is again. In an old-fashioned glass, put a quarter-size pour of simple syrup in the bottom of the glass. Add 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, an orange wedge, and a maraschino cherry. Muddle gently without smashing everything together. Then pour 2.5 ounces of bourbon onto the ingredients and add ice, and then stir. Then settle back down to watch the races from Churchill Downs. You'll find this recipe and a few more recipes straight from Louisville at alushlifemanual.com, where you'll also find all the ingredients in our shop. If you're heading to Louisville anytime soon, check out my Lush Guide to the Urban Bourbon Trail on alushlifemanual.com. Discover where you can watch barrels being made right in front of your eyes. Next time on Lush Life, St. Kevin will be calling us all to County Wicklow, Ireland, for a sip of one of the Glendalough Distillery spirits. If he isn't available, then Gary McLaughlin, one of the co-founders, will gladly fill in. Before running off, remember to head to alushlifemanual.com/merch for all your Lush Life gifts. Until next time, bottoms up. Thanks for listening to the Lush Life podcast. For more information and links to everything you've heard, plus a whole lot more, please visit alushlifemanual.com. Always remember the wise words of Oscar Wilde. All things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly. Okay, I said that last part. Theme music is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. Lush Life is produced by Evo Terra. And I'm your drinking partner, Susan Schwartz. I'll see you at the bar.